Hey guys, welcome to Witchcraft Wednesdays. Now, let me put the camera down so it's not all shaky and stuff. So, today on Witchcraft Wednesdays, it is Wednesday. It is currently pretty dark, and that's because it is, as I'm filming this, it is nighttime on Tuesday. So, one thing that I've been kind of thinking about that kind of goes along with witchcraft is since Easter just passed, and that, from what I know of it, that holiday is all about the day that Jesus rose from the dead. Here's my theory. There is no way that he could have actually risen from the dead without some kind of witchcraft being involved. So either he wasn't dead in the first place, or there was some kind of necromancy involved there. Someone, a necromancer, a witch, someone skilled in that kind of magic brought him back, and that is the only explanation, that if he was actually dead. Although, not too long ago, people would attach bells to the top of a grave. They have a string going down into the coffin, and everyone would write around the gravesite for 24 hours. So if the person that had been buried wakes up in a coffin, they can ring the bell and their loved ones would dig them up. Because apparently during those times, even the best doctors had a hard time telling the difference between dead and unconscious. And they probably buried a lot more people alive than they realize. Because at some point it had to have become a huge problem, or else they wouldn't have gone to all the trouble of attaching a bell to a grave. And no one wants to sit around in a graveyard for 24 hours waiting to hear a bell ring. So the only reason anyone would do this is if this happened a lot. And so, like 1,000 years before they came up with the whole bell thing, they must have been even worse at telling the difference. So my theory is that when someone took him down from that cross, he wasn't dead. He was just really weak. He'd probably lost a lot of blood, and he hadn't eaten anything in a while or had anything to drink. So he's probably really weak, and his pulse was probably really low as well. So, and maybe he was like barely breathing. And so he was nearly dead, but not quite dead yet when they took him down. And then somehow, haven't really thought into the details of it, he got his strength back and decided to go, hey everybody, I'm back. And that's what I'm thinking. Plus there's the whole Virgin Mary thing. There's no way she was a virgin. You can't get pregnant without having sex. So maybe she didn't want anyone to know that she wasn't zealot, she wasn't pure, or maybe perhaps she could have been raped and she thought that, well, that couldn't possibly count. Because if some kind of higher power had a kid, most likely the kid would be too powerful for a mortal woman to carry to term and survive childbirth. It would just be too much for her. And the fact that she not only survived childbirth, but the baby did not appear to possess any special abilities. He was a completely ordinary baby. And so for me, that just, it doesn't make sense. What also doesn't make sense is, well, a lot of things, like every single story in the Bible does not make sense to me. But also, how did the wise men know where to find Jesus, or that he had even been born, or that he was supposedly the Son of God? How did they know? How did Mary and Joseph know they were coming? And why did they walk there? And also, the gifts, some of those things didn't make any sense because they were not tangible items. Actually, all of them were not tangible items. So it doesn't make sense. Like, this was like before they had anything. So there was no way of communication besides word of mouth. And so who told those wise men about this child that was born in a barn? That's just why Christianity does not make sense to me. And the only reason I know about this stuff is because my grandfather on my mom's side, He's really into his beliefs. Like, he's a devout Christian, but he's not. He gets into these long-winded speeches that no one could possibly pay attention to about religion and about stories in the Bible. And I'm just like, how can he believe this stuff? I mean, this man is supposed to be a scientist. He's got all these science books like quantum physics, all that stuff. He has books all around his house about all different kinds of sciences, and he's read them all. Yet he believes in something that sounds completely ridiculous to me. And I believe in magic. So this video has become a rant. Although it is quite possible that this man isn't right in the head because he's in his 80s and he refuses to retire. He can barely see, he can barely hear. And yet he's still working. No, he has some seriously thick prescription glasses and hearing aids that I hardly ever see him actually wearing. It doesn't make sense to me how this brilliant man believes any of this crap. And I'm sorry for those who get offended by this, because this is what you believe, but it just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't even sound remotely plausible. Like, the only person who could part the sea would be a witch. Some kind of magic user. And that guy who lived inside a whale, yeah, the whale's stomach acids would have eaten him alive, literally. And also, the largest thing that a blue whale can swallow is an orange. They are filter feeders. They feed off of tiny little fish. They don't eat massive organisms. It's literally not possible for a whale to swallow a human. So, none of these stories make any sense. Like, the whole Noah's Ark thing. If that were true, then every single animal on Earth would have been seriously inbred. And I think we've all seen what inbreeding does. It's bad. Like, King Tutankhamun his parents were brother and sister. And his whole family was seriously inbred. I mean, the guy had to walk with a cane. He had a flat head. An overbite. He had a cleft foot. A cleft palate. Yeah, he had a clubbed foot. So he had to walk with a cane. And he died at 18. He had enlarged breasts and womanly hips, even though he was a male. Like, and there's the whole thing of how did the animals not all eat each other? Like, how did the lions not slaughter every other animal, including Noah, while on that boat? Like, none of this is even plausible from a scientific point of view. And not even from a magical point of view. Like, there's just no way. And like, the deities that I believe in are only powerful because their worshipers give them that power. There's a scientific explanation for almost everything. Yet, there isn't a single scientific explanation for anything in that book. And that's my rant. Not much of a Witchcraft Wednesday, but you know what? I did my makeup and it took a really long time. So I'm not gonna waste it. I did not go to all this work for nothing. Bye, guys. This is Jules, my familiar. My familiar. She is a Norwegian forest calico, and she's very fluffy. Yeah. A lot of witches have a familiar, which is an animal companion for a witch that helps them with their magic. Having your familiar nearby strengthens your powers. And so that really helps. And you don't choose your familiar your familiar chooses you. As well as a familiar gets reincarnated and finds you every single time.